The acquisition should finalize by the next quarter.
Excellent. That will significantly impact the portfolio.
The crystal chandeliers of lavender and thyme cast golden light across white tablecloths as Shanice Williams balanced 3 plates along her left arm, her feet aching in shoes she'd restolen twice already. She'd been waiting tables at Atlanta's most exclusive restaurant for 6 years, long enough to recognize the difference between old money and new, between genuine smiles and the kind people wore like expensive watches. What she hadn't expected on this humid August evening was to hear a sound that would crack open her carefully constructed walls. The desperate, hiccuping sobs of a child who'd cried herself past the point of caring who heard. The little girl sat at table 12, her shoulders shaking beneath a designer dress that probably cost more than Shanice's monthly rent. Across from her, a man in a $5,000 suit scrolled through his phone with the practiced indifference of someone who'd built empires by ignoring distractions. The child's tears fell onto untouched lobster ravioli, while her father, if that's what you could call someone so absent while physically present, didn't even glance up. Shanice had seen plenty in her years at Lavender and Thyme. She'd watched business deals collapse over dessert, witnessed marriage proposals met with rejections, and served champagne to people celebrating things that should have made them ashamed. But something about this particular tableau of wealth and loneliness made her throat tight. The girl couldn't have been more than 7, with thick braids woven with golden thread and eyes that held the kind of sadness that doesn't belong in childhood. "Table 12 needs a refresh on water," Marcus, the floor manager, whispered as he passed. "And try to keep the kid quiet. Mr. Donovan Wellington doesn't appreciate disruptions in his dining experience." His voice carried the particular disdain reserved for complaining customers who tipped well enough to earn the right to complain. Shanice nodded, grabbing a fresh pitcher of lemon water, her mind already rehearsing the careful dance of being helpful without being intrusive, present without being noticed. 6 years of invisible service had taught her exactly how much humanity the wealthy wanted from their servers. Just enough to feel benevolent. Never enough to feel obligated. But as she approached table 12, something shifted in her chest. Maybe it was because the girl's crying had taken on a quality that reminded Shanice of herself at that age, back when her own mother was dying and the world felt like it was ending in slow motion. Maybe it was the way the child's small hands were clenched so tight her knuckles had gone pale. Or maybe Shanice was just tired of pretending not to see the obvious pain happening right in front of her face. "More water, sir," she asked, her voice carrying the professional warmth she'd perfected over thousands of interactions. Donovan Wellington didn't look up from his phone. "Fine, and bring the check. We're leaving." The little girl's crying intensified, a wounded sound that made several nearby diners glance over with varying degrees of annoyance and concern. One elderly woman in pearls actually put down her fork, her expression troubled. "I don't want to go," the child managed between sobs. "I'm not done eating." "You haven't touched your food, Amara," Donovan said, his tone flat, still not meeting his daughter's eyes. "We've been here 45 minutes. I have a conference call at 8. Amara. The name meant eternal, everlasting. Shanice felt something crack a little wider in her chest. "Maybe she just needs a minute," Shanice heard herself say, the words out before she could stop them, before the part of her brain that paid bills and kept her employed could intervene. Donovan's head snapped up, his eyes sharp and cold. He was handsome in the way of men who'd never been told no, his jaw cut like it had been designed in the same boardroom where he made his billions. "Excuse me?" The restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Shanice felt Marcus's glare from across the room like heat from an oven. She'd just committed one of the cardinal sins of service. She'd inserted herself into a customer's personal business. But Amara was looking at her now, those tear-filled eyes holding something that looked dangerously close to hope, and Shanice found she couldn't retreat even if she wanted to. "I just mean," Shanice said carefully, keeping her voice gentle, "sometimes kids need a little time to settle. Restaurants can be overwhelming." She turned to Amara, crouching down so they were eye level, a move that would definitely earn her a write-up later. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" "Don't," Donovan started, but Amara was already talking, the words tumbling out like water from a broken dam. "I want my mama," she said, her voice small and broken. "I want her to come back. Daddy says she's not coming back, but I want her anyway. I want her to make me grilled cheese and sing the bedtime song and she dissolved into fresh sobs. Shanice's throat closed up. She knew this pain. God, did she know it. The wanting of someone who wasn't there anymore. The way that absence sat in your chest like a stone. When did you lose your mother? Shanice asked softly, ignoring Donovan's sharp intake of breath, ignoring Marcus's approaching footsteps, ignoring everything except this child's grief. 11 months ago, Amara whispered, 337 days. Daddy keeps track on his computer, but he won't talk about her. He says we have to move forward. Shanice looked up at Donovan Wellington and saw something flicker across his face. Pain, maybe, or anger, or some combination of the two. His jaw was clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. That's enough, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. We're leaving. Now. But Shanice was standing now, and some reckless part of her that had been dormant for years was suddenly violently awake. She just needs a mom, she said, the words clear and firm, or at least someone who'll let her talk about the one she lost. The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus had frozen mid-step. The elderly woman in pearls had her hand pressed to her chest. Even the kitchen noise seemed to have dimmed, like the entire restaurant was leaning in to hear what would happen next. Donovan stood slowly, his 6'3" frame unfolding with the controlled grace of barely contained fury. You have no idea, he said, each word precisely articulated, what you're talking about. You don't know me. You don't know my daughter, and you certainly don't know anything about my wife. You're right, Shanice said, and she could feel herself trembling, but couldn't seem to stop talking. I don't know you, but I know what it looks like when a child is drowning in grief and nobody's throwing her a life raft. I know because I was that child. My mama died when I was 8, and everyone wanted me to move forward too. Move forward, be strong, don't cry, don't make people uncomfortable with your sadness. You know what that taught me? That my pain didn't matter, that I didn't matter. Something dangerous flashed in Donovan's eyes. How dare you? Mr. Wellington, I am so sorry. Marcus had materialized at the table, his voice obsequious and panicked. Shanice, step away from the table. Now, sir. Please let me comp your entire meal and… She's not wrong. Everyone turned. The elderly woman in pearls had spoken, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd spent 8 decades learning when to stay silent and when to speak up. I've been watching you ignore that baby's tears for the better part of an hour, young man, and shame on you. Grief doesn't care about your conference calls. Ma'am, please, Marcus started, but the woman waved him off like he was an annoying fly. My husband died 43 years ago, she continued, looking directly at Donovan. Left me with 3 children under 10. And you know what the worst part was? People who told me to move on, to be strong, to not burden my children with my sadness. So I swallowed it all down, and my kids learned to do the same, and we all suffered alone together. Don't make the same mistake I did. Amara had stopped crying, watching the adults with wide eyes like she couldn't quite believe people were fighting over her right to grieve. Donovan looked like he'd been struck. His hand, which had been reaching for his wallet, fell to his side. For just a moment, the carefully constructed armor cracked, and Shanice saw something raw underneath. A man barely holding himself together, drowning in the same grief he was trying to shield his daughter from. You don't understand, he said, and his voice had lost its edge, gone hollow. If I stop moving, if I let myself feel it, I'll… He stopped, seeming to realize where he was, who was listening. The armor slammed back into place. This is none of your business, any of you. He pulled out his wallet, threw down several $100 bills without counting them, and took Amara's hand. The little girl looked back at Shanice as her father led her away, her expression holding something that might have been gratitude, or might have been goodbye, or might have been a plea for help. The restaurant slowly came back to life, conversations resuming, forks clinking against plates. But Shanice stood frozen at table 12, staring at the money and the untouched food, and feeling like she'd just witnessed something important slip away. My office, Marcus said quietly. Now. The walk to Marcus's office felt like a death march. Shanice had known this job wasn't her calling, wasn't where she was meant to be, but it paid the bills and let her send money to her grandmother in Savannah and gave her health insurance when she needed her inhaler refilled. She couldn't afford to lose it over a moment of misguided compassion. Marcus closed the door and sat behind his desk, his expression unreadable. 6 years, he said. 6 years of perfect service. Not a single complaint. And you choose tonight to decide you're a therapist instead of a waitress? I'm sorry, Shanice said and meant it. I was out of line. You were way out of line. You know what Donovan Wellington could do with one phone call? He could ruin this restaurant. He could ruin you. He probably will. Shanice nodded, waiting for the inevitable. She was already mentally calculating how long her savings would last, which bills she could postpone, whether her grandmother would be okay if the money stopped coming for a month or two. But Marcus was looking at her with something that wasn't quite anger. Why'd you do it? The question caught her off guard. She thought about lying, about giving him some professional answer about customer service and reading situations wrong. But she was probably fired anyway, so what was the point? My mama died when I was 8, she said. Breast cancer. And my daddy couldn't handle it, so he just pretended it never happened. Packed up all her things, took down all her pictures, never said her name again. By the time I was 10, it was like she'd never existed. Like my grief for her was something shameful that needed to be hidden away. Her voice cracked. I saw that little girl crying for her mother, and I saw her father refusing to acknowledge it. And I couldn't. I couldn't watch another child learn that her pain doesn't matter. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed, the sound heavy with something that might have been understanding. You're not fired, he said, but you're on thin ice. The next time you decide to play hero, do it on someone else's shift. Shanice felt her knees go weak with relief. Thank you. I promise it won't happen again. Yeah, well, Marcus pulled off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. For what it's worth, you weren't wrong. That kid needed someone to see her. I just wish it hadn't been in the middle of dinner service at Atlanta's most expensive restaurant. Before you find out what happens next, I need to ask you something real quick. You're here watching this story unfold, feeling these emotions, connecting with these characters. But here's something wild. 90% of the people watching this video right now haven't hit that subscribe button yet. 90%. That means if you're relating to Shanice's courage, if Amara's grief is touching your heart, if you want to see where this journey goes, you're exactly who this channel is for, but you might miss the next story if you don't subscribe. So do me a favor, hit that subscribe button right now. It takes 2 seconds, it's free, and it means you'll never miss these heartwarming stories of karma, redemption, and everyday heroes. And while you're at it, smash that like button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Are you in Atlanta like Shanice? New York? Los Angeles? Maybe you're all the way in London or Amsterdam. I love seeing where our Folktales Passage family is spreading across the world. So go ahead, subscribe, like, comment your location. Let's build this community together. Now back to the story, because what happens next will change everything. Shanice took the train home that night with her mind spinning. Her efficiency apartment in East Point felt smaller than usual, the silence louder. She made herself ramen because it was cheap and easy, ate it standing at the counter, and tried not to think about Amara Wellington's tear-stained face, or Donovan Wellington's barely contained devastation, or the way she'd just risked everything over a stranger's pain. She was scrolling mindlessly through her phone when it buzzed with an unknown number. Hello? Is this Shanice Williams? A woman's voice, professional, crisp. Yes? This is Bethany Chen, executive assistant to Donovan Wellington. Mr. Wellington would like to meet with you tomorrow at 10 a.m. at his office downtown. Are you available? Shanice's heart dropped into her stomach. This was it. He was going to sue her, or get her fired properly, or... Ms. Williams? Yes. I can be there. Excellent. I'll text you the address. Please bring identification for building security. The line went dead. Shanice stared at her phone like it had just grown teeth. What had she done? She barely slept that night, running through scenarios in her head. By the time morning came, she'd convinced herself she was about to be served with some kind of legal papers, a restraining order maybe, or a lawsuit for emotional distress or interference or something she couldn't even name. Wellington Industries occupied floors 20 through 30 of a glass tower that seemed to scrape the underside of heaven itself. Shanice felt absurdly out of place in her best interview outfit, a dress she'd bought at Target 3 years ago, and black flats that pinched her toes. The security guard checked her ID twice, like he couldn't quite believe someone who looked like her had legitimate business in a building like this. Bethany Chen met her at the 25th floor, a tiny woman in a power suit that probably cost what Shanice made in 6 months. "Right this way, Miss Williams." They walked through halls of polished marble and abstract art that Shanice suspected was worth more than her entire life. Young professionals in expensive clothes moved with purpose, their faces set in expressions of focused ambition. No one looked happy, exactly, but they all looked important. Donovan Wellington's office took up the entire corner of the floor, windows on two sides offering views of Atlanta that made the city look like a toy model of itself. The man himself stood silhouetted against that impossible sky, his back to the door, his shoulders rigid. "Mr. Wellington," Bethany said softly, "Ms. Williams is here." He turned and Shanice was struck again by how handsome he was and how utterly exhausted. There were shadows under his eyes that expensive suits couldn't hide, a tightness around his mouth that spoke of sleepless nights and swallowed grief. "Thank you, Bethany. Hold my calls." When they were alone, the silence stretched like taffy. Shanice waited, her heart hammering, for whatever was coming. "I owe you an apology," Donovan said finally. And Shanice blinked because that was absolutely not what she'd expected. "Last night I was angry and embarrassed, and I took it out on you when you were just trying to help my daughter." "Mr. Wellington, you don't—" "Please," he held up a hand. "Let me finish. I've been thinking about what you said, and what that woman in pearls said, and mostly about what Amara's been trying to tell me for 11 months that I haven't been willing to hear." He moved to his desk, picked up a framed photograph, stared at it for a long moment before turning it to face Shanice. The woman in the photo was beautiful. Warm brown skin, bright eyes, a smile that looked like sunshine felt. She was holding a baby, laughing at something off camera, and the love in her expression was so palpable it hurt to look at. "That's my wife, Keisha," Donovan said, his voice carefully controlled, "and our daughter when she was 6 months old. Keisha died 11 months and 4 days ago. Aneurysm. She was fine 1 minute, cooking dinner and singing along to the radio, and then she was gone. Just gone. Like someone had flipped a switch." Shanice felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm so sorry." "Everyone's sorry," Donovan said, but there was no bitterness in it, just exhaustion. "Everyone wants to help, wants to fix it, wants to make it better. But there is no fixing it. There's just this absence, this Keisha-shaped hole in the world that nothing can fill." He set the photo down carefully like it might break. "So I did what I knew how to do. I worked. I filled every minute with meetings and calls and deals and strategy sessions. I kept moving because if I stopped, I'd have to feel it. And I was pretty sure feeling it would kill me." "And Amara?" Shanice asked softly. "I thought I was protecting her," Donovan said. "I thought if I stayed strong, if I showed her how to keep going, she'd be okay. But you were right. I was teaching her that her grief didn't matter, that she didn't matter." His voice cracked. "I was doing exactly what my father did to me when my mother died, swearing I'd never be like him and becoming him anyway." He sank into his desk chair like a puppet with cut strings. "Last night after we left the restaurant, Amara wouldn't stop talking about you, about how you understood, how you listened, how you said it was okay to miss her mother. She talked more in that car ride than she has in months. And I realized I've been so busy trying not to drown in my own grief that I left my daughter drowning in hers." Shanice felt something shift in her chest, that crack widening into something that might have been understanding or compassion or just the simple recognition of shared pain. "What do you need from me?" she asked. Donovan looked up, surprised. "What? You didn't bring me here just to apologize. What do you need?" He studied her for a long moment, like he was trying to solve an equation. "Amara she needs someone who gets it, someone who's been where she is, someone who's not me, because I'm too close to it." too broken by it. He took a breath. I'd like to hire you as her nanny. Of all the things Shanice had expected, this wasn't even on the list. She actually laughed, a startled sound that echoed in the cavernous office. You want to hire me as a nanny? Mr. Wellington, I'm a waitress. I don't know the first thing about. You knew exactly what my daughter needed last night, Donovan interrupted. You saw her pain when everyone else, including me, was trying to ignore it. You spoke to her like she mattered, like her grief was valid, like she was a whole person deserving of being heard. He leaned forward, his eyes intense. That's not something you can train someone to do. That's who you are. I have a job, Shanice said weakly, her mind reeling. I'll pay you triple what you're making at Lavender and Time, plus full benefits, paid vacation, and a signing bonus. He named a figure that made Shanice's knees weak. You'd live in our guest house, have your own space, your own life. You'd just be there for Amara, help her navigate this, help her remember her mother is someone worth remembering. It was too much, too fast, too surreal. Yesterday, she'd been refilling water glasses and dodging handsy finance bros, and now she was being offered more money than she'd ever imagined making to take care of a grieving 7-year-old. Why me? She asked. You could hire anyone, someone with actual credentials, with experience, because Amara asked for you, Donovan said simply. This morning at breakfast, she said, Daddy, I want the nice lady from the restaurant to come live with us. She understands about missing Mama. And I realized my daughter has been trying to tell me what she needs for almost a year, and I've been too proud or too scared or too stubborn to listen. So I'm listening now. Shanice thought about her efficiency apartment, about double shifts and aching feet, and customers who treated her like furniture. She thought about her grandmother in Savannah, who needed a new roof and medication that Medicare didn't quite cover. She thought about the way Amara had looked at her, like she was a lifeline in dark water. I need to think about it, she said. Of course. Donovan pulled a business card from his desk drawer, wrote something on the back. That's my personal number. Call me when you decide. But Shanice? He met her eyes. I hope you say yes. I think you might save my daughter's life. Maybe mine too. Shanice left Wellington Industries in a daze, the business card burning a hole in her pocket. She walked for blocks without really seeing where she was going, her mind a carnival of competing thoughts. This was insane. This was a gift. This was dangerous. This was exactly what she'd been praying for. This was a terrible idea. She found herself at Piedmont Park, sitting on a bench by the lake, watching joggers and dog walkers and people whose lives made sense. Her phone rang. Her grandmother. Hey, Graham. Baby girl, you sound stressed. What's wrong? Shanice laughed, the sound a little hysterical. I just got offered a job that would change my life, and I don't know if I should take it. Tell me. So she did. She told her grandmother everything. About Amara, about Donovan, about the money in the guest house, and the whole surreal situation. When she finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. Graham, that little girl needs you, her grandmother said finally. And maybe you need her too. You've been drifting since you moved to Atlanta, baby. Working a job that doesn't feed your soul, living in a place that doesn't feel like home, keeping everyone at arm's length because you're scared of losing someone again. Her voice was gentle but firm. Maybe this is God putting someone in your path who needs the exact pain you carry. Maybe this is how you turn your grief into something that helps instead of hurts. Shanice felt tears slip down her cheeks. What if I'm not good enough? What if I make it worse? Then you'll learn and try again. That's all any of us can do. Her grandmother paused. Your mama would be proud of you, you know, for seeing that child's pain, for being brave enough to speak up, for considering this even though it scares you. That decided it. Shanice called Donovan Wellington from that bench in Piedmont Park and told him yes. 3 days later, she moved into the guest house on the Wellington estate in Buckhead, a neighborhood where the houses had names instead of numbers, and the hedges were trimmed into geometric perfection. The guest house was bigger than any apartment she'd ever lived in, with tall windows and hardwood floors, and a kitchen with appliances she didn't know how to use. Donovan gave her a tour of the main house, 8,000 square feet of carefully curated emptiness. Everything was expensive and tasteful and utterly devoid of warmth. Keisha decorated it, he said quietly as they walked through rooms that looked like museum exhibits. After she died, I couldn't bring myself to change anything, but I also couldn't stand to really live in it. So we just exist here, like ghosts haunting our own lives. Amara was at school, wouldn't be home until 3. Donovan had taken the afternoon off, a rarity, he admitted, to help Shanice settle in. I should warn you, he said as they stood in the kitchen that could have housed a restaurant. I'm not good at this. The whole domestic thing, personal thing. Keisha handled all of that. She made this house a home, made our family a family. Without her, He gestured helplessly at the expensive emptiness around them. You're just a man who lost his wife and doesn't know how to keep going, Shanice said. That's nothing to be ashamed of. Something in his expression softened. You're very direct, aren't you? Is that a problem? God, no. He actually smiled, a real smile that changed his whole face. Everyone in my life tells me what they think I want to hear. It's exhausting. Your honesty is refreshing. Even when I'm calling you out for ignoring your daughter's tears in public? Especially then. The smile faded. I need someone who'll tell me the truth, Shanice. Someone who'll call me on my bullshit. Can you do that? She thought about it, really thought about it. This man was a billionaire, her boss, someone who could ruin her life with a phone call. But he was also a father who was drowning, who was asking for help in the only way he knew how. Yeah, she said, I can do that. At 3:15, a black SUV pulled into the circular driveway. Shanice watched from the window as Amara climbed out, her school uniform crisp, her backpack pink with sequin butterflies. She moved slowly, like someone much older, like weight sat on her shoulders that 7-year-olds shouldn't have to carry. Then she saw Shanice through the window, and her whole face transformed. She ran, actually ran, bursting through the front door with an excitement Shanice suspected was rare. You came! Amara threw her arms around Shanice's waist, squeezing tight. Daddy said you were coming, but I didn't know if it was real. Shanice hugged her back, feeling the smallness of her, the bird-bone fragility beneath the expensive clothes. I'm real. I'm here. Are you staying? Please say you're staying. I'm staying, Shanice promised, and felt Donovan watching them with an expression she couldn't quite read. The first few days were an adjustment. Amara followed Shanice everywhere, a tiny shadow desperate for attention, for connection, for someone who would listen when she talked about her mother. And talk she did, a flood of memories and grief that had clearly been dammed up for months. Mama used to make these pancakes shaped like animals, Amara said one morning as Shanice made breakfast. She'd do elephants and giraffes, and once she made a whole dinosaur, but it fell apart when she tried to flip it, and we laughed so hard. What was her favorite animal to make? Shanice asked, whisking eggs. Butterflies. She said they were special because they transformed from one thing into something completely different. She said people could do that too, if they were brave enough. Amara's voice got small. Do you think she transformed into something? Like, is she a butterfly now? Or a star? Or... I think, Shanice said carefully, that your mama is wherever love goes when someone dies. And that love doesn't disappear. It just changes form. Like those butterflies. Amara considered this seriously. I like that. Donovan worked long hours, leaving before Amara woke and returning after she slept. Shanice saw him mostly in passing, a figure in expensive suits moving through the house like he didn't quite belong there. But sometimes late at night, she'd hear music coming from his study, old R&B songs that she suspected Keisha used to love, and she'd know he was in there doing his own private grieving. One evening, 2 weeks into the job, Shanice knocked on his study door. Come in. He sat behind a massive desk covered in papers and screens, his tie loosened, exhaustion written in every line of his body. Music played softly. Lauryn Hill. To Zion. This was playing when Amara was born, he said without preamble. Keisha was in labor for 17 hours, and she had this whole playlist. And when Amara finally came, this song was playing. Keisha cried and I cried, and we held this perfect tiny person, and I remember thinking nothing bad could ever happen, because we had this proof that love was real and good things existed. Shanice sat in the chair across from him, saying nothing, just listening. I keep thinking I see her, Donovan continued, his voice raw, in the kitchen making coffee, or in the garden with her stupid floppy hat that she loved, or curled up on the couch reading. For just a second, I forget she's gone, and then I remember, and it's like losing her all over again. He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. Does it get better? Please tell me it gets better. It gets different, Shanice said honestly. The sharp edges get smoother. The pain becomes something you can carry instead of something that crushes you. But it doesn't go away. My mama's been gone 19 years, and sometimes I still reach for the phone to call her before I remember. 19 years, Donovan repeated. God. 19 more years of this. 19 years of learning to live with it, of finding joy again, of watching your daughter grow up and knowing her mother would be proud. Shanice leaned forward. But you have to let yourself grieve, Donovan. You have to stop running from it. Because Amara's watching you, learning from you, and right now you're teaching her that the way to handle pain is to pretend it doesn't exist. He flinched like she'd hit him. I don't know how to do it differently. Start by talking about Keisha. Say her name. Tell Amara stories about her. Let yourself cry when you need to cry instead of hiding in here with the music turned down low so nobody knows you're breaking. I'm her father, he said. I'm supposed to be strong. You're human, Shanice countered. Being strong doesn't mean not feeling pain. It means feeling it and surviving it anyway. Something shifted in his expression. Resistance giving way to something that might have been hope or might have been desperation. Will you help me? Not just with Amara, but with this? With learning how to grieve without drowning? It wasn't what she'd signed up for. Her job was to care for Amara, not to save her broken father. But looking at Donovan Wellington, billionaire businessman reduced to a man begging for help navigating grief, Shanice found she couldn't say no. Yeah, she said, I'll help. They started small. Shanice suggested Donovan come home for dinner at least 3 nights a week. He resisted at first, conference calls, meetings, deadlines, but she pushed back, gentle but firm. The business won't collapse if you leave at 6, but your relationship with your daughter might. The first family dinner was awkward, all of them sitting at the massive dining table that could seat 12, used to eating separately in their own private silences. Amara picked at her food, watching her father like she was waiting for him to disappear. Donovan checked his phone obsessively, unable to be fully present even when he was physically there. Tell me something good that happened today, Shanice said, looking at Amara. We learned about butterflies in science, Amara said quietly, like Mama used to make in pancakes. Donovan's hand tightened on his fork, but he didn't speak. What kind of butterflies? Shanice asked. Monarchs. They migrate thousands of miles, and nobody knows exactly how they know where to go. The teacher said it's like they have maps in their hearts. She looked at her father. Mama would have liked that. Silence. Donovan's jaw worked like he was chewing glass. Finally, your mother loved monarchs. We saw clouds of them once in Mexico, on our honeymoon. She stood there crying because they were so beautiful. Amara's eyes went wide. It was possibly the first time she'd heard her father voluntarily mention her mother in months. Really? Really? She took about 1,000 pictures, and none of them turned out because she was shaking from crying so hard, but she didn't care. She said some things were too beautiful to capture. You just had to witness them. His voice was thick with unshed tears. She was like that. She paid attention to beautiful things, made sure other people saw them too. I miss her, Amara whispered. Me too, baby girl. Donovan's voice cracked. Me too. It wasn't much. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. Over the following weeks, something shifted in the Wellington house. Donovan started coming home earlier, joining them for dinner more regularly. They established small rituals, movie nights on Fridays, farmers market visits on Saturday mornings, Sunday breakfasts where Shanice taught Amara to make those animal pancakes her mother used to make. Shanice learned the rhythms of their grief, the triggers and tender spots. She learned that Amara couldn't stand the smell of gardenias because her mother's funeral had been covered in them. She learned that Donovan couldn't watch romantic comedies because Keisha had loved them, would quote them at inappropriate moments, would laugh at the same jokes no matter how many times she'd seen them. She learned that grief wasn't linear, wasn't logical, didn't follow any kind of schedule. Some days were better. Some days Amara would wake up crying and couldn't say why. Some days Donovan would cancel everything and spend hours in the garden Keisha had planted, pulling weeds with his bare hands like he could manually remove the pain if he just worked hard enough. And slowly, carefully, Shanice began to unpack her own grief too. Talking about her mother with Amara, sharing memories she'd kept locked away for years, the time her mama had stayed up all night sewing her a Halloween costume because she'd forgotten to ask until the day before, the songs she used to sing while cooking, the way she smelled like cocoa butter and vanilla, the shape of her laughter. "Do you still miss her?" Amara asked one evening as they sat in the garden, watching fireflies blink in the twilight. "Every day," Shanice said honestly, "but it doesn't hurt the same way it used to. Now it's more like a warm ache, like missing home when you're far away. But knowing home still exists somewhere. Will it always hurt? The missing part, yeah, but you'll get better at carrying it, and you'll find ways to keep her with you, in memories, in stories, in the things she taught you, in the parts of yourself that are just like her." Amara was quiet for a moment. Then, "Daddy says I have Mama's smile." "You do. I've seen pictures. You light up the same way she did. He doesn't talk about her much, but he's getting better, right? Because of you?" Shanice felt her chest tighten. "He's getting better because he's ready to get better. I'm just helping him find the way." "I'm glad you're here," Amara said, leaning into Shanice's side. "You make the sad parts less lonely." That night, Shanice found Donovan in the kitchen, staring at a cookbook like it held the secrets of the universe. "Keisha wrote in the margins," he said when he noticed her. "Little notes about substitutions and measurements, and," he pointed to a recipe for peach cobbler. "Here, she wrote, 'Donovan doesn't like too much cinnamon, but pretends he does to be polite.'" I'd forgotten that. How she knew things about me I didn't even know about myself. He closed the book carefully, like it was made of glass. "I hired a grief counselor, had my first session this morning." Shanice felt something warm bloom in her chest. "Yeah? How'd it go?" "Terrible. I cried for 45 minutes straight and couldn't even articulate why." He smiled, but it was shaky. "But the counselor said that was normal. Said I've been holding it in for so long that when the dam finally broke, of course it was a flood." "That's good, Donovan. That's really good. I also," he hesitated, vulnerability written across his face. "I want to do something for Keisha's birthday. It's next month. I've been avoiding it, avoiding all the dates that hurt. But I think Amara needs to mark it somehow. Needs to know it's okay to celebrate her mother even though she's gone." "What did you have in mind?" "I don't know. That's the problem. Keisha was the one who did things like this. She planned parties and made them magical. I write checks and make deals. I don't know how to honor someone's memory." Shanice thought about it. What did Keisha love? What made her happy? People. Community. She was always organizing things. Block parties, fundraisers, volunteer projects. She dragged me to serve food at homeless shelters and make me actually talk to people instead of just writing donations. She believed in showing up and being present. His voice went soft. She was the best person I've ever known. And I took her for granted because I thought we had forever. "So let's do that," Shanice said. "Let's organize something that brings people together, something that helps others, something that would make her proud." They planned it together over the next few weeks. A community day at a local recreation center in the neighborhood where Keisha had grown up, before Donovan's wealth had moved them to Buckhead. Free food, activities for kids, resources for families. Scholarships announced in Keisha's name for local students. Donovan threw himself into it with the same intensity he brought to business deals, but this time with heart behind it. He called in favors, wrote checks, showed up to planning meetings, and actually participated instead of delegating. And Amara helped too, making flyers at school, talking excitedly about honoring her mother, proud in a way Shanice hadn't seen before. The day of the event dawned bright and clear, one of those perfect Georgia mornings where the heat hadn't yet turned oppressive. They arrived early to help set up, and Shanice watched Donovan move among the volunteers, most of them people who'd known Keisha, who remembered her kindness, and saw him transformed. Not the billionaire businessman, not the grief-stricken widower, but just a man trying to honor someone he loved. By 10 a.m., the recreation center was packed. Families spilled across the basketball courts and playground, kids shrieking with joy at the bounce houses and face painting stations. Parents gathering information about job training programs and housing assistance, and the college scholarships that would bear Keisha Wellington's name in perpetuity. The smell of grilled food hung in the air, burgers and hot dogs, but also jerk chicken and mac and cheese, the kind of soul food Keisha had loved. Shanice stood near the scholarship booth, watching Donovan crouch down to talk with a little boy who'd won a prize at the ring toss. The child was maybe 5, all gap-toothed grin and boundless energy, and he was telling Donovan an elaborate story about his grandmother's cat. And Donovan, this man who commanded boardrooms and built empires, listened with complete attention, like that story was the most important thing in the world. He's different. Shanice turned to find an older woman beside her, maybe 70, with silver hair and elaborate braids and eyes that missed nothing. "Excuse me?" "Donovan Wellington. He's different than he was." The woman extended a hand. "I'm Patricia Morehouse. I taught Keisha in 3rd grade. Haven't seen Donovan since the funeral." "Shanice Williams. I work for the family." Patricia's eyes crinkled with knowing amusement. "You're more than that, honey. I've been watching you all morning. The way that little girl stays close to you. The way Donovan looks to you like you're his compass. Your family, whether you've figured that out yet or not." Before Shanice could respond, Amara ran up, her face painted like a butterfly, her joy so pure it was almost painful to witness. "Shanice, come see. They're teaching people how to plant butterfly gardens, and they said we could plant one at home for Mama." "That sounds perfect, sweetheart. Daddy's gonna help. He said we could put it where Mama used to have her regular garden, and we could plant all her favorite flowers and—" She stopped, suddenly uncertain. "Is it okay to change Mama's garden?" Shanice knelt down so they were eye level. "What do you think your mama would want?" Amara thought about it seriously. "I think she'd want things that are alive and growing. I think she'd want the butterflies." "Then that's your answer." Patricia Morehouse watched this exchange with tears in her eyes. "Keisha would have loved you," she said to Shanice. "She always said the world needed more people willing to see others' pain and sit with it instead of trying to fix it or run from it." As the afternoon wore on, Shanice began to understand the scope of Keisha Wellington's impact. Person after person approached with stories. The single mother Keisha had helped get into nursing school, the teenager she'd mentored through a rough patch, the family whose rent she'd paid for 6 months when the father lost his job. Keisha had moved through the world leaving trails of kindness, helping people in ways both grand and small, and never asking for recognition. "She just showed up," one woman said, tears streaming down her face. "When my son was sick and I couldn't afford his medicine, Keisha showed up at the hospital with everything he needed and acted like it was nothing. Like of course she'd help. Like that's just what you do." Donovan stood nearby, listening to these stories with an expression Shanice couldn't quite read. Pride, certainly. Grief, always. But something else too. Maybe determination, maybe purpose. Maybe the understanding that Keisha's legacy wasn't just in memories but in action, in continuing the work she'd started. Late in the afternoon, when the event was winding down and families were heading home with full bellies and goodie bags and information packets, Donovan climbed onto a small stage they'd set up. The remaining crowd gathered, maybe 100 people, their faces turned toward him with varying degrees of curiosity and affection. "I'm not good at this," Donovan started, his voice amplified by the microphone, but still somehow intimate. "Public speaking, yes. Business presentations, absolutely. But talking about feelings, about love and loss and everything that matters, that was Keisha's department." A ripple of recognition moved through the crowd. People who knew, who remembered. 11 months ago, I lost my wife, and I handled it the way I handle everything. I worked. I buried myself in deals and strategy and anything that would keep me from feeling the enormity of what was gone. I told myself I was being strong for our daughter, that I was protecting her from my pain, but really I was just hiding from grief, from memories, from the terrifying reality that the best person I'd ever known was gone, and I had no idea how to exist in a world without her. His voice cracked. He paused, swallowed hard, continued. Someone recently told me that being strong doesn't mean not feeling pain. It means feeling it and surviving it anyway. And that's what we're trying to do, me and Amara. We're trying to survive this, to honor Keisha not by forgetting our sadness, but by remembering her joy, by continuing the work she cared about, by showing up for people the way she always showed up. He gestured to the scene around them. The volunteers packing up, the families leaving with smiles, the scholarship recipients clutching their award letters like golden tickets. This is what Keisha would have wanted, not monuments or buildings with her name on them, but this, community, connection, people helping people, because that's what we're supposed to do. Amara stood at the front of the crowd and Donovan looked directly at her. Baby girl, your mama was magic. She made everything better just by being in it. And I'm sorry, I've been so scared of my sadness that I forgot to celebrate her joy. But we're going to do better. We're going to remember her out loud. We're going to live in a way that would make her proud. People were crying openly now. Shanice felt her own tears falling, didn't bother to wipe them away. Thank you all for coming, Donovan finished. Thank you for sharing your Keisha stories. Thank you for keeping her memory alive. And thank you for reminding me that love doesn't end when someone dies. It just changes form. The applause was thunderous. But what stuck with Shanice was the sight of Amara running to her father, Donovan sweeping her up in his arms, both of them crying and laughing, and holding each other like they were learning how to be a family again. The ride home was quiet but comfortable. The three of them exhausted in the good way that comes from meaningful work. Amara fell asleep in the back seat, her butterfly face paint smudged, a peaceful expression on her face that Shanice hadn't seen before. Thank you, Donovan said softly, his eyes on the road. For what? For seeing us, for giving us permission to grieve, for helping us remember that it's okay to be broken and okay to heal, and that those things aren't mutually exclusive. He glanced at her, his expression open in a way it hadn't been when they first met. I don't think we would have survived this without you. You would have figured it out, Shanice said, but her voice was gentle. Maybe, eventually, but I'm glad we didn't have to. He paused. I know this started as a job, a transaction, but somewhere along the way, you became family, Shanice finished, the word feeling right in her mouth. Yeah, we did. Back at the house, they carried Amara inside, Donovan holding her with a tenderness that made Shanice's chest ache. She watched him climb the stairs to tuck his daughter in and felt something shift in her understanding of her place here. She wasn't just an employee anymore, wasn't just a helper or a nanny or whatever professional designation they'd started with. She was part of something bigger, part of this small, broken family learning how to be whole again. She was making tea in the kitchen when Donovan came back down, his tie gone, his shirt sleeves rolled up, exhaustion and something like peace written across his face. She's out cold, he reported. Didn't even wake up when I took her shoes off. Today was big for her. For all of us. It was. He poured himself a glass of water, leaned against the counter. I've been thinking about the future, about what comes next. Shanice felt a flutter of anxiety. Was this where he told her the job was temporary, that they didn't need her anymore now that they were healing? I want to expand what we did today, Donovan said. Make it permanent. Create a foundation in Keisha's name that does this kind of work year-round. Scholarships, community programs, support for families in need. The whole thing. He looked at Shanice. And I want you to help run it. Me? You understand what Keisha was about. You see people the way she saw them, as whole humans deserving of dignity and support. You care in a way that can't be taught. He set down his glass. I'll hire all the professional staff we need, but I want you at the center of it, making decisions, shaping programs, being the heart of it the way Keisha would have been. It was overwhelming, the trust he was placing in her, the opportunity he was offering. a chance to turn her own grief into something purposeful, to honor her mother's memory by helping others navigate their own losses and struggles. "I don't have experience with that kind of work," Shanice said. "Neither did I with grief counseling, but I'm learning. We'll figure it out together." He smiled, and it reached his eyes this time. "What do you say? Want to help me build something that matters?" She thought about the little girl asleep upstairs, who'd learned to talk about her mother again, who laughed more than she cried now, who was slowly learning that grief and joy could coexist. She thought about the man in front of her, who'd been so locked in his pain he couldn't see his daughters, who was learning to be vulnerable, to ask for help, to live instead of just survive. She thought about all the families they'd helped today and all the ones they could help tomorrow. "Yes," Shanice said, "let's build something that matters." The months that followed were a blur of purposeful activity. They established the Keisha Wellington Foundation, starting small but thinking big. Donovan brought his business acumen and connections. Shanice brought her understanding of what communities actually needed, her ability to listen and see and respond with compassion rather than pity. They hired a small staff, people who'd known Keisha, who understood the mission. They rented office space in the same neighborhood where they'd held that first community day, refusing to operate from some sterile downtown tower. They created programs, grief support groups for children who'd lost parents, tutoring and mentorship for struggling students, job training for adults trying to rebuild their lives, and they showed up, not just with money and resources, but with presence, with time, with genuine care. Donovan learned names, remembered stories, asked about people's kids and their health and their hopes. He was still a businessman, still ran Wellington Industries with the same sharp focus, but he wasn't only that anymore. He was becoming the kind of man Keisha had seen in him, the kind of father Amara needed, the kind of human who understood that wealth without compassion was just numbers on a spreadsheet. Amara thrived. She started a butterfly garden at school, teaching other kids about migration and transformation. She spoke at a foundation event about losing her mother, her voice steady, her words honest. She made friends, laughed easily, cried when she needed to, but didn't drown in it anymore. And Shanice found something she hadn't known she was missing: purpose. Every family she helped, every grieving child she sat with, every parent she listened to felt like honoring her own mother's memory, like saying, "Your pain mattered, your life mattered, and I'm going to make sure other people don't have to hurt alone the way we did." One evening, about 6 months after the foundation launched, Shanice was working late in her office when Donovan knocked on the door. "Got a minute?" "Always, what's up?" He sat across from her, and she noticed he was dressed casually, jeans and a sweater, no tie, no armor. "I've been thinking about something Patricia Morehouse said at that first event. She said you were family whether we'd figured that out yet or not." Shanice smiled. "I remember. I think she was right, but I also think," he paused, choosing words carefully, "I think somewhere along the way, you became more than family to me. And I need to know if I'm reading that wrong, if I'm making this complicated when it should be simple." Shanice's heart hammered. They'd been dancing around this for weeks, maybe months, the way their hands would brush when reaching for the same file, the way their conversations stretched long into the night, the way they'd built something together that felt like more than professional partnership. "You're not reading it wrong," she said quietly. Relief flooded his face. "Thank God. I've been terrified I was just projecting or wishful thinking or disrespecting Keisha's memory by having feelings for someone else." "Loving someone new doesn't mean you love Keisha any less," Shanice said. "Love isn't finite. There's not a limited supply. Your heart is big enough for both." "Is your," Donovan asked, "big enough for a complicated man with a grieving daughter and more baggage than any reasonable person should have to carry?" She stood, moved around the desk, took his hands in hers. "I think my heart is exactly the right size for exactly this. For you, for Amara, for the beautiful, messy, complicated life we're building together." He kissed her then, gentle and careful and full of promise. And Shanice felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope, not the desperate, grasping kind, but the steady, sure kind that comes from building something real on a foundation of shared pain and genuine understanding. They took it slow, dated properly even though they lived on the same property and saw each other daily. They wanted to do it right for Amara's sake and their own. They talked about Keisha often, making sure her memory was honored, ensuring Amara knew that loving Shanice didn't mean forgetting her mother. And Amara, wise beyond her years, seemed to understand. "Mama would like you," she told Shanice one night as they made butterfly pancakes together. She always said Daddy needed someone who wouldn't let him hide behind his work. Someone brave enough to call him on his stuff. "Oh yeah?" Shanice flipped a particularly good butterfly. "What else did she say about your dad?" "That he was the best man she'd ever known. He just forgot sometimes." She said her job was to remind him. Amara looked up, her eyes serious. "But she's not here to remind him anymore. So maybe that can be your job now, if you want it." Shanice's vision blurred with tears. "I'd be honored to have that job." A year after Shanice had first walked into the Wellington house, they held another community day, bigger than the first. The foundation had grown, helped hundreds of families, made a real difference in real lives. They announced new programs, expanded scholarships, a community center in Keisha's name, partnerships with local schools and nonprofits. But the best moment came when a teenage girl approached Shanice, shy and uncertain. "I just wanted to say thank you," the girl said. "I'm one of the scholarship recipients. And my mom died 2 years ago, and I didn't think I'd be able to go to college. But because of Mrs. Wellington's foundation, because of what y'all are doing, I got a full ride to Spelman. I start in the fall." She was crying now, happy tears mixed with grief and gratitude. "My mama would have been so proud. And I wanted you to know that what you're doing, it matters. You're changing lives. You changed mine." Shanice hugged this girl she'd never met, this living testament to what happened when you transform pain into purpose, and felt her mother's presence like a warm hand on her shoulder. This was what healing looked like, not the absence of pain, but the transformation of it into something that helped instead of hurt. That evening, after the crowds had gone and the volunteers had packed up, the three of them sat in the butterfly garden they'd planted together. Monarchs danced among the flowers drawn by the milkweed and zinnias, landing and leaving in patterns that looked choreographed. "They're migrating," Amara said, watching them with wonder, "starting their journey." "Just like us," Donovan said quietly, his arm around Shanice, his daughter leaning against his other side, "learning how to navigate by the maps in our hearts." Shanice thought about maps, about journeys, about the strange and painful and beautiful path that had led her from a waitress in a restaurant to this moment, this family, this life she'd never imagined. She thought about Keisha Wellington, who she'd never met but felt like she knew, whose legacy of love and service had created space for this second chance at happiness. "I think we're going to be okay," she said, and meant it. "Better than okay," Donovan corrected, pressing a kiss to her temple. "We're going to be happy. Maybe not every day, maybe not in the ways we expected, but genuinely, deeply happy." Amara looked up at both of them, her face painted like a butterfly again, her smile bright as the sunset behind them. "Mama would say we're transforming, like caterpillars into butterflies, like sad into happy, like broken into whole." "Your mama," Shanice said, "was very wise." "She still is," Amara said confidently. "She's just wise from somewhere else now. But I can still feel her, especially here with the butterflies." They sat together as the sun sank lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. The butterflies kept coming, kept leaving, kept following ancient instructions written in their blood and bones. And the Wellington family, expanded now, reconstituted, healed in ways that honored their brokenness instead of denying it, watched them together, grateful for second chances, for brave waitresses who spoke truth, for little girls who insisted on remembering, for the strange mercy of grief that, when given space to breathe, could transform into love again. In the house behind them, photos of Keisha smiled from every room, not hidden away but celebrated, integrated into their daily lives. Her cookbook sat on the kitchen counter, margins full of her handwriting, recipes tried and tested and shared. Her garden had become their garden, blooming with new life while honoring what came before. And somewhere in the complex mathematics of loss and love, in the alchemy that transforms pain into purpose, they'd found their way back to something like joy, not despite the grief, but through it. Not by forgetting, but by remembering well. The butterflies knew this truth already. That transformation requires both death and rebirth, that beautiful things often come from painful places, that migration is just another word for finding your way home by following the maps written in your heart. And as the last light faded and the first stars appeared, Shanice thought about that night in Lavender and Thyme, when she'd heard a child crying and decided to speak up instead of staying silent. One moment of courage, one choice to see someone else's pain instead of looking away, and everything had changed. That was the real magic, she thought. Not grand gestures or dramatic transformations, but small acts of compassion that rippled outward in ways you couldn't predict. A waitress who listened, a father who learned to grieve out loud, a little girl who insisted on remembering, a community that showed up, a foundation built on love, a family reconstituted from broken pieces. "I love you both," Donovan said into the gathering darkness, his voice thick with emotion. "I love us, this thing we've built together." "I love us too," Amara agreed. "So do I," Shanice said, and felt the truth of it settle in her bones like something that had always belonged there, just waiting to be acknowledged. The butterflies would return next year, following their eternal patterns. The foundation would grow, help more people, honor Keisha's memory through action. Amara would keep healing, keep growing, keep being the extraordinary human her mother had known she'd be. Donovan would keep learning to balance work and family, to grieve and love simultaneously, to be the man Keisha had seen in him. And Shanice would be there through all of it, not as an outsider or an employee, but as family, as partner, as someone who understood that the best thing you can do with your pain is transform it into something that helps someone else survive their own. They stayed in the garden until the fireflies joined the stars, until Amara's yawns grew too frequent to ignore, until the night wrapped around them like a benediction. And when they finally went inside, it was together, as it would be from now on. A family not built by blood alone, but by choice, by compassion, by the courageous decision to keep loving even after love has broken your heart. The restaurant seemed like a lifetime ago, but Shanice was grateful for it, for the moment that had led to this, for the crying child who'd cracked open her careful walls and let something beautiful grow in the ruins. Sometimes salvation comes from the places you least expect, from strangers who see you, from grief that transforms, from butterflies that prove even the most profound metamorphosis is possible if you're brave enough to let it happen. And in the end, that's what love is. A kind of bravery, a willingness to be transformed by another person's existence, to let their joy become your joy and their pain become your pain, and somehow, miraculously, to find that in the sharing, both are made bearable. The Wellingtons had learned this lesson the hard way, but they'd learned it nonetheless. And tomorrow they'd wake up and keep learning it, keep choosing each other, keep transforming their grief into gardens where butterflies could land and rest before continuing their impossible, beautiful migrations. Just like people do when they're brave enough. Just like love does when you let it.